it's always fun slash awkward. It's like, oh, guys, gotta stop. New, go, panel, go.
All right, get out of here. So welcome everybody to the Hidden Gems of Tokusatsu with yours truly, Andres Perez, aka Kaiji Noir, and here with me is none other than the one and only Davis Madole, aka TitanGoji.
Everyone, like Andres said, I'm Davis Madole. Maybe not. Who knows?
Potentially,
yeah.
I've heard maybe he might be Davis Madole. Madeley, potentially. The word's still out there. So the two of us, we've been huge fans of the tokusatsu genre. And so when we were asked, we were given the chance to produce our very own panel for us to host as a follow-up to last year's Giant Robot panel. I figured, wouldn't it be cool to put a spotlight on a lot of the lesser known hidden gems of the tokusatsu genre. And so Davis and I talked about it as to what kinds of media, be they short films, television series, movies, that we would like to recommend to you guys. And we put together a list of 25 pieces of media that we thought were definitely worth checking out. Now, to start things off, would you like to move on to the next slide? So yes, because of the vast multitude of content in this beloved medium, we unfortunately could not list every work. However, we do hope this list inspires you to look deeper into the realm of tokusatsu beyond Godzilla, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and Super Sentai. Otherwise known as the pillars of tokusatsu. And yes, David has already talked about Gunhead last year, and he is prohibited from doing so again.
Well, it's been great. Bye.
Otherwise, we had like two options. Either this would have been a panel as to why Gunhead is the greatest piece of cyberpunk media ever, or this would have been a panel focused solely on one director and his library of work. But we'll get to him eventually in this panel. Let's see. Next one, please. So the first question is, what is tokusatsu? And I thought this would be a good place to start, given the fact that a lot of people, I'm sure, have heard of the name Godzilla before, especially with the unbridled success of Godzilla -1. A lot of people have seen it by now. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend the film. And Godzilla is pretty much the face of tokusatsu. It was kind of almost where it all started before. Back in the day, the filmmaker Eiji Tsuburaya, who was a special effects director for Toho Studios, he got his start doing a lot of war films back in the 40s. His effects with battleships and pyrotechnics were so great that people actually thought it was real documented war footage. And eventually, as World War II came to an end, Toho Studios shifted from making war films to science fiction. And that's really where he got he and his team got their big break, especially by 1954 with the creation of Godzilla, the original masterpiece. And eventually, after a slew of other Japanese productions like Rodan, The Mysterians, Mothra, he eventually moved into television by starting his own company called Tsuburaya Productions. From there, he created the Ultraman series that you can see there in the second photo. And from there on out, that ended up inspiring, in between Godzilla and Ultraman, other people came to the picture. And by the 60s, we had an enormous boom of tokusatsu material. And yes, as the description goes in the slide, tokusatsu is a term that refers to Japanese media that largely consists of special effects, i.e. suitmations, miniature, pyrotechnics, etc. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Davis?
Not necessarily, but I was gonna go a little more into that with this next slide here. Andres mentioned before that Godzilla, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and Super Sentai are considered the pillars of tokusatsu, and I'd say that's very fitting because all of them are just as important as one another, as they also represent different aspects of what Tokusatsu normally consists of. Like with Godzilla, you have giant monster films and TV shows, or kaiju. To put it short, with Ultraman, you have Kyodai heroes or giant heroes, which there are a good number of those in this list that we have. And then we get into Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. Now, the idea behind Kamen Rider was to basically create a show like Ultraman, but with a more reasonable budget. And instead of being a giant hero, he's more, I suppose you could say like street level, like someone like Spider-Man in that sense. And after Kamen Rider became a huge success, that eventually went into Super Sentai, where the idea was to imagine a whole team of Kamen Riders. I should also note that while Eiji Tsuburaya had a huge hand in the creation of Godzilla and Ultraman, there's another creator by the name of Shoto Ishinomori who, again, just as important as Tsuburaya, he was the creator of not just Kamen Rider Super Sentai, but also other beloved Japanese superheroes like Kikaider, Cyborg 009, Skullman, which was actually the prototype to Kamen Rider, a whole bunch of world of heroes that he was responsible for. And Tsuburaya also has a huge catalog of superheroes, again, which we'll get into eventually. Sorry, Gamera. Yeah, you are just as important when it comes to the whole kaiju genre.
Unfortunately, he doesn't have a big giant movie out in theaters at the moment, but he does have a brand new anime if you are so interested in checking out on Netflix. So going into this, you probably are familiar, for anyone who grew up in the 90s and 2000s, you probably are familiar with the idea of men in rubber suits and spandex fighting on model sets and backdrops, due to such programs like Power Rangers or Masked Rider or Big Bad Beetleborgs or even Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, as all of these shows were all adaptations of Japanese productions. Power Rangers came from Super Sentai, Masked Rider and Kamen Rider Dragon Knight came from the Kamen Rider franchise, Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad was adapted from Gridman the Hyper Agent, and Beetleborgs was adapted from Juto B Fighter. And along the way, we've also had several Western attempts at 100% fully original Tokusatsu productions, those being Mystic Knights of Ternanog and Tattooed Teenage Alien Fighters from Beverly Hills. And so, despite the success of Power Rangers, it's the level of success between all of these Western attempts at capturing that Tokusatsu in spirit, fluctuates from production to production. But it's definitely a style that has seeped its way into American pop culture and Western culture as a whole, as it's definitely a very recognizable style that can instantly tap into a certain generation that grew up with this sort of media, whether it be people who grew up with the dubs of Godzilla films back in like the 70s, or even people like 90s kids like me who grew up with stuff like Power Rangers or Masked Rider, or even VR Troopers, which was another show that was adapted from Japanese productions.
And
so
for this list, we're going to start off with the H-Man, directed by Ishiro Honda. In this chilling thriller, a man made of radioactive ooze haunts the streets of Tokyo. Andres, would you like to add more to that?
Of course, yes. So we started out with this one. We're actually going to be going in chronological order from oldest production to newest. I really wanted to highlight the H-Man, directed by Ishiro Honda, because I thought it was a really interesting way to start things off, because we're not dealing with a giant monster, we're not dealing with a superhero or a giant robot. We're here to deal with a human level threat that kind of fits in line with a lot of like the 1950s monster movies of the day, where a lot of creatures and monstrosities were born from a radiation from the atomic bomb, nuclear testing. A lot of that anti-nuclear sentiment was very much so prevalent well after the creation of stuff like the original Godzilla. Here we have a ship that was lost at sea, and a good chunk of the crew were horribly mutated into gelatinous, liquid, vaguely humanoid creatures called H-men. And unfortunately for all the people of Tokyo, the star end up getting involved in a criminal drug smuggling ring where these creatures start attacking certain people, and these detectives are left with two mysteries to solve. On one hand, you've got the mystery of the H-Man, them trying to figure out who they are, what they are, where they came from, while also dealing with gangsters trying to figure out who is it that's been taking out their men, and also trying to figure out just where their money is, where their drug supplies are. So it's a really cool, unique blending of a crime drama and a sci-fi horror film that I feel like merges the two genres wonderfully in a way that you don't really see this that often even today. The movie was released on DVD in a triple feature with the original Mothra and Battle in Outer Space, though thankfully it has been re-released thanks to the sci-fi double feature and is available for free on Tubi.
All right, and up next, we have another Ishiro Honda classic right here, and one of my personal favorite J-horror films, Matango, also known as Attack of the Mushroom People, but let's face it, Matango sounds way cooler. Castaways find themselves on an island infested with strange fungi that mutates whoever consumes them. Matango, in my opinion, it's such a wonderful example of using atmosphere to build tension. And when you're creating a horror film, I feel like that is an absolute must, because there's this particular edge that it creates where you're not sure where things are going to go. At first, you are a little bit curious about these mushrooms that start popping up, and on an island where resources are starting to become more scarce, the more these people start using them, the more this sort of like resort to using those mushrooms for consumption like kind of grows, and this idea starts to just eat away at them before they eventually start to eat the mushrooms. And it's honestly some really chilling stuff. Great cast all around too. You also have Kumi Mizuno, who is a very recognizable Godzilla actress. She's been in films like Godzilla Final Wars, Ebira Horror the Deep, as well as Monster Zero, which is where a lot of kaiju fans may recognize her from. And this movie is also available for streaming on Tubi, and if you have a subscription for the Criterion channel, it's also available on that platform as well. Hopefully it gets a Blu-ray soon. All right, again, we got Ishiro Honda. This time it is Atragon. The Mu Empire rises to conquer the Earth, and the only weapon to stop it is the flying undersea warship, the Gotengo. Andres, would you like to take it away on this one?
Absolutely. So I especially wanted to highlight this film in particular because, in a way, this may sound strange at first, but I kind of see it as the Japanese equivalent to, say, Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers, where, much like Starship Troopers, this was a film that was based on a book. Specifically, it was sort of like a loose adaptation of two books. It was based on the Undersea Warship, A Fantastic Tale of Island Adventure from 1899 by Shunro Oshikawa, and The Undersea Kingdom by Shigeru Komatsuzaki. And the writer of this film, Shinichi Sekizawa, he worked on a lot of Toho's non-Godzilla sci-fi action giant monster films. And his approach is very similar to that of the Starship Trooper movie, where Starship Troopers was sort of like a pseudo pro-fascist propaganda piece of literature that the director was just not a fan of at all, and ended up turning the adaptation into a satire. This film was based on the source material that was very much so like pro-nationalist, pro-imperial Japan, and Shinichi Sekizawa, the writer of the film, sort of took inspiration from a lot of that pro-Imperial Japan nationalist ideology that was still present even as far as the 60s, and wanted to sort of like have this movie be a critique on that sort of mentality, as that pointless fanaticism that the writer commented on. And in this film, we end up with a captain from a Japanese captain who went into hiding following the loss, Japan's loss in World War II, and had spent decades building the ultimate warship, the Gotengo, in the hopes of bringing Imperial Japan back to its former glory. However, at the same time, we end up with the Mu Empire, who is planning to take over the world. And so it is up to a team of our protagonists to convince the captain to let go of the past, to let go of his foolish dreams of reviving Imperial Japan and be able to fight for the greater good, as humanity is forced to confront this threat that the likes of which they have never seen before. The social commentary, I thought, was very well done for this film, especially during this time in Japan's history. And I definitely thought that it would be a great look into just how prevalent the themes of and the influence of World War II still affected Japanese cinema, even like nearly 20 years after the war was over. And it's also very fun. As you can see, we have ourselves a kaiju in the form of Manda, a creature that would go on to appear in several Godzilla films. And the film itself, Atragon, would end up leading to an animated adaptation in the 90s called Super Atragon, which I also highly recommend you guys check out.
Alrighty, moving on, we got Daimajin going over to Daiei Studios, directed by Kimiyoshi Yasuda. Violent warlords anger the spirit of a sentient statue who comes to life and unleashes its wrath. I just want to go ahead and say that 1966 was a very huge year for Tokusatsu in general, because not only do we have movies like The War of the Gargantuas, it was also the year Ultraman made its debut, and while Gamera was basically Daei's flagship kaiju series, on the flip side, we had the Daimajin trilogy, which is basically about a giant statue that comes to life whenever it is angered. And the production design in these films is supreme. It still holds up to this day. There are several shots here and there where I'm still trying to figure out how they even executed some of the effects work. I forget his name, but the suit actor who plays Daimajin in this film, he played the villain in Fist of Fury, starring Bruce Lee, which is a very nice little piece of trivia there. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Andres?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, Daimajin is definitely one of the most unique forms of Tokusatsu. I think it's one of the few period pieces in Tokusatsu films that fully takes place in during this feudal Japan period. Stories is amazing. The scopes are epic, and it's crazy to believe that they actually made 3 Daimajin films, all practically in the same year, all made and released in the same year. So if you ever watch the original Daimajin, I highly recommend watching the other 2. Daimajin, Daimajin Strikes Again, Daimajin Returns, and Daimajin Strikes Again, I believe. Return of Daimajin, and then Daimajin Strikes Again.
They all have more than one title. It gets a little confusing.
That is true. But luckily, the movie has recently been released by Arrow Video on Blu-ray. There was also a Mill Creek trilogy Blu-ray release, and they have been released before, I believe, on DVD by ADV. So there are definitely a number of physical releases for the Daimajin trilogy floating out there. It is quite an experience unlike anything you'll ever see.
Oh, absolutely. All right, up next we have Ambassador Magma from P Productions. When aliens led by Goa invade the Earth, the golden giant Magma rises to put an end to the conflict.
So I want to highlight this one because this was from the legendary, a very legendary figure in Japanese media. You probably have heard, if you're familiar with Astro Boy, you may know this individual, Osamu Tezuka, also known as the father of manga. He had created a manga called Ambassador Magma, and this was a live action adaptation of the source material. Now, previously, there was a live action adaptation of his Astro Boy manga that I believe actually predates the original anime. But because this movie has a lot of historical significance, especially in terms of early tokusatsu media coming to America, I thought this was worth checking out. This series actually came out in America under the name The Space Giants, where Magma, the titular giant golden pseudo-robot golem-esque being, was referred to as Goldar, which is just a little funny thing I thought was worth bringing up. The interesting thing about Ambassador Magma is that it does sort of follow a pseudo Monster of the Week type of format where Goa has an army of monsters and henchmen at his disposal to wreak havoc upon the world, and the main protagonist, a young boy, is actually friends with Magma, who actually in this story has not only a robot wife but also a robot child. All three were created by a wizard who goes by the name of Earth. I gotta tell you, this story is actually, honestly, like buck wild. And so the wizard had created these three guardians to protect the Earth, and had bestowed upon the boy a whistle. If he blows the whistle once, he summons the robot boy. Whistles it twice, blows it twice, he summons the robot wife. And if he blows 3 times, which is the most often case, he ends up summoning the big guy to come in and save the day. And also, it's kind of worth noting for giant robot fans out there that Magma himself can be considered the very first transforming giant robot, as he and his wife and son all can transform into rocket ships as they transport themselves from their volcano base hidden away from civilization to wherever they need to go to save the day. So it is available on YouTube, all 50 plus episodes. Unfortunately, there are no subtitles for this series, but I thought this plot is easy enough to understand once you have the context and a Wikipedia article at your disposal. Also interesting to note is that unlike a lot of Monster of the Week plots, this actually takes a more serialized direction with how it tells its story, in a way similar to, say, Doctor Who. A lot of these plots would take anywhere from like 2 to 4 episodes to tell their ongoing story arcs, which is pretty unique, especially in 1966. Also, one last thing to note about Ambassador Magma: it's the first colored tokusatsu television series, predating Ultraman by just a few days from their rival companies over at Tsuburaya. All right, you can take it away, Davis.
All right, up next, we have Golden Bat, directed by Hajime Sato. With the evil Dr. Naozo plots to take over the world, researchers awaken the legendary hero, Golden Bat. This is a very unique entry, in this entire realm of media, because Golden Bat, if you do a little bit of research, it is actually the very first superhero to ever exist, starting off as a Kamishibai created by Takayo Nagamatsu and Suzuki Ichiro. And for those who don't know what Kamishibai is, it's basically a non-digital version of like what we're doing right now. You basically have these wooden panels with images or paintings, what have you, on them, and you swap them out like it's a storybook. You put in one image, you talk about what's going on in this part of the story, and then you move on to the next one. It was a very unique and rather revolutionary way of storytelling. So to adapt that into a feature film, and another safe to say, revolutionary style at that time for Japan. It was almost poetic in that sense. And another thing I also want to highlight is the cinematography of this film, because the way everything is shot, the way everything is lit, framed, blocked, it almost feels like you're watching a comic book that's come to life. And because of that, I gotta say, Golden Bat's usually like one of the best superheroes to ever exist. And after all, he was the first, and you can still see Golden Bat's influence to this day, because Golden Bat actually has a currently ongoing manga that started, I want to say, a year or two ago, back around this time of the year. And Golden Bat was also essentially the basis for another Tokusatsu hero who we'll get to eventually. All right, up next we have Giant Robo, also known as Johnny Sacco and his flying robot. The young boy controls a giant robot to fight the evil forces of Big Fire.
Right. So this series is definitely like has a very special place in my heart. Probably one of the most popular and most iconic giant robot series, live action giant robot series during this time. This was created by another legendary manga creator by the name of Mitsuteru Yokoyama. He is the creator of Tetsujin 28, also known as Gigantor here in the US. Mitsuteru Yokoyama, he was approached previously by Toei to create a brand new story, a brand new manga for them to adapt into live action, similar to his prior successful work, Tetsujin 28, where essentially you have a young boy controlling a giant robot via remote to help fight the forces of evil. And while Yokoyama ended up creating a manga that delved more into a spy action thriller fantasy with elements of giant robots in it, the live action series itself definitely took more notes from his prior work, sort of creating an interesting mix of Giant Robo's story and Tetsujin 28. Side note, it should be noted that much like Astro Boy, Tetsujin 28 also had its own live action adaptation during the black and white days of Tokusatsu television. We wanted to include it here, but unfortunately, due to its inaccessibility, we thought that it was much better to highlight Giant Robo, especially when it is still available to this very day. So you still have a very fun series, great music, a great cast, fun, diverse cast of heroes and villains, and who could not love a giant robot with a big old Sphinx pyramid pharaoh head?
Oh yeah. And I just want to go back to the live action Tetsujin real quick before we move on. If anyone's curious about it, it is really funny. If you have the time, look it up and you'll see what I mean. All right, up next we have Mirror Man from Tsuburaya Productions. Kyotaro Kagami, who is half human, half alien, uses his powers to protect Earth from the invaders. Now, this was during a period when Tsuburaya was really experimenting with other heroes that that they can market, because with the Ultra series you had Ultra Q, Ultraman, and then Ultra 7, and that was meant to be the sort of like standalone trilogy of shows, and then they would kind of use that as a stepping off point to kind of experiment here and there. So in this period, in the late 60s and early 70s, there are shows that weren't so successful, and then you have shows that actually were pretty successful, like Mirror Man here. The best way I can describe Mirror Man is to quote our good friend Ace Maroke. If Ultraman is Superman, Mirror Man is Batman. Mirror Man is almost like the similar concept of Ultraman, but it's a lot darker tonally and thematically as well. It's also very unique because Mirror Man doesn't just fight monsters on Earth. Mirror Man battles these creatures in an alternate dimension, which sounds very ambitious for a show like this at the time. especially when Tsuburaya was starting to become more experimental in regards to these types of productions. Andres, do you have anything you'd like to add to Mirror Man?
Yeah, sure. So it also should be noted that the character of Mirror Man, despite not being anywhere near as prominent as Tsuburaya's most popular creation, Ultraman, Mirror Man himself would go on to have a legacy of sorts. He had a movie made in a movie reboot back in the 2000s, and Tsuburaya would go on to create Mirror Knight, who was an homage to the character of Mirror Man in Ultraman Zero, the movie, where he would since become an reoccurring character in the Ultraman franchise. And I believe there was also a manga made in recent years.
And moving on, again from Tsuburaya Productions, we have Red Man. The titular hero battles a series of monsters and executes them in the most brutal fashion, and that is putting it lightly, because it's almost like Red Man like tortures them for pleasure, but I mean that's that's a whole other can of worms, because Red Man is such an anomaly of a series. In addition to Tsuburaya experimenting with what they can and can't do as a means to kind of try and keep the company afloat, they started the series called Ultra Fight, where they would basically take different fights from different Ultraman episodes and then air them on TV for 5 minutes. And considering the popularity of Ultraman back then and nowadays, it kind of sounds like an infinite money glitch, but it worked. So they decided to do something similar for Red Man, because when they ran out of footage in Ultra Fight, they took the promotional suits and filmed out in the middle of nowhere and just did these wrestling matches on the fly. And Red Man is very much that. It almost has no story, but that's also kind of the beauty of it, because you just get to see this one guy just hunt down these monsters and executes them, and just like like the way he kills some of these monsters is just hilarious, because like out of nowhere there will be episodes where like he just summons this spear out of like thin air and then launches it like a javelin and like strikes them through the heart. And because it's a rubber suit, you're not expecting anything like blood, and then next thing you know the monster is bleeding, and now you don't know what to think anymore.
It should be noted that, like, I want to say a good number of years ago, Redman actually became a meme of sorts when Tsuburaya decided, for whatever reason, this was the show that they were going to make widely available online on YouTube. And so it sort of like garnered a bit of like a cult status among Tokusatsu fans, and even people who aren't even familiar with Godzilla and Ultraman. They just see this dude randomly killing off, hunting down monsters who seemingly aren't doing anything wrong at all. And so it just became like the popular notion that he is a serial killer among kaiju. And the fact that like he's just this silent, horrific being just going after these people, that it just became so horrifying. It goes around to being funny again. And it was sort of like this rebirth of popularity that eventually led to the creation of a Red Man comic that eventually was produced in Japan, created through American comic book artists.
He's also the most easily quotable superhero, because his only all he says is "red fight."
That's all the kaiju will be able to. That will be the lasting kaiju the kaijus will hear before they are brutally slaughtered to death.
Yeah. And moving on, we also have Jumborg Ace. To avenge his older brother, Naoki Tachibana pilots Jumborg Ace to wage war against the Groth aliens. And now this is kind of interesting, because you think with shows like Ambassador Magma and Giant Robo, which were shows that Tsuburaya like like they were competing with at the time. You think that they would come out with a giant robot series sooner, but at the same time, the mecha genre had a huge boost in popularity thanks to manga and shows like Mazinger Z and Getarobo, and now you have Jumborg Ace, which almost fits right into that genre perfectly due to how well they go hand in hand with one another.
I did want to add that, like Mirror Man, Jumborg Ace would also be homaged in future Ultraman productions. Specifically, in the same movie, Ultraman Zero, the movie, we had a character introduced to audiences named Genebot, and Genebot himself was the modern day equivalent or the modern day homage to Jumborg Ace. And like Mirror Knight, he too would also continue to make sporadic appearances since 2010 onwards in the Ultraman franchise.
Next we got Super Robot Red Baron. Andres, I know you love this one.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, Super Robot Red Baron, Dr. Devilar steals a series of giant robots, all but Red Baron, which Ken Kurenai controls to stop the technological takeover. This one, I remember this was released on DVD many, many years ago, I believe, while I was still in high school in the late 2000s. Senkosha Productions is a very interesting company because they put out a few tokusatsu series that aren't well known, or at least aren't talked about as much as, say, Toei or Tsuburaya Productions. They created the likes of Red Baron. It had a sequel in the form of Mock Baron. They had another show called Iron King, and another one last series that I'm familiar with called Silver Kamen or Silver Mask. And despite its sort of relative obscurity within the wider picture of tokusatsu, Red Baron does tend to make appearances and returns once every couple of decades. He had an anime in the 90s, and recently there was, I want to say a good 5 or so years ago, there was a movie called Bravestorm, which was an attempt to revitalize a lot of Senkosha Productions characters in live action. Bravestorm happened to have been like a pseudo reboot crossover featuring Red Baron and Silver Kamen. But as for the original series that started it all, it's a lot of fun. It's almost like, in a way, a pseudo prototype to the Super Sentai formula that we've come to know and love. Now, Super Sentai did exist around this time in the form of Go Ranger, but unlike Super Sentai at the time did not include any giant robots. It was mainly just the team of 5 individuals out there kicking butt. And Toei wouldn't exactly start the formula off until the late 70s with their Japanese adaptation of Spider-Man, in which you did have a spandex-clad superhero with a giant robot. So I would say Super Robot Red Baron is sort of like the innovator of this type of storytelling, where you have a group of scientists who on the side fight evil as these ass-kicking vigilantes. Meanwhile, the protagonist, Ken, he happens to be able to pilot his giant robot whenever things get too big for even them to handle. And the action itself, it's a lot of fun, very high octane, very energetic, and overall it's a ton of fun. And even if you are familiar with the Big O, you may recognize its final attack, in which the Big O wholeheartedly paid loving tribute to.
Right, and moving on, we have The Last Dinosaur, directed by Alex Grashoff and Suginobu Kotani.
So this one was another interesting one I want to highlight because it's a Japanese-American co-production between I believe Toei and Rankin Bass Productions. Sorry, thank you, Toho and Rankin Bass Productions, where you have a big game hunter and scientist in a very journey to the center of the earth type of story, use this experimental drilling vehicle to find themselves in this lost land. Unfortunately, things go awry, their vehicle no longer works, and they're stuck and forced to survive in this fantastical yet dangerous land of caveman and dinosaurs. Meanwhile, they are constantly being hunted by this T-Rex. And if the T-Rex happens to look a bit familiar, this was actually this suit was actually reused for the Japanese series Dinosaur. I believe it was called Dinosaur Hunter Eisenborg, and the series itself would be compiled into a compilation film called Attack of the Super Monsters in the American VHS market. But it's a lot of fun. The actors do a really fantastic job. I think like the big standout here is Richard Boone playing the wild, eccentric game hunter who becomes obsessed with taking down Earth's largest, most ferocious creature, even if it cost him his own sanity and life. So it's a lot of fun. Do highly recommend it, especially for Richard Boone.
All right, we have Space Sheriff Gavon from Toei. Now, there was a period where the Kamen Rider series was on hiatus, and Toei decided that their next flagship superhero brand would be the Metal Heroes. First off, we have Gavon, and that eventually spun into Charivan, Spielbahn, G-Bahn, a whole bunch of other metallic superheroes. Some of which did share a sort of like intergalactic police officer sort of feel to it. This one's just a lot of fun. I'm like 5 episodes deep into it, and I cannot wait to finish it. There's some outstanding effects work going on here. Lots of great optical effects as well, and yeah, just some great fight sequences too.
I should also like to add on that for those familiar with Big Bad Beetleborgs and VR Troopers, both of them are from the Metal Heroes franchise, and Space Sheriff Gavon is pretty much the grandfather, was the first of the Metal Hero series. So if you ever wonder where Beetleborgs and VR Troopers came from, it all started with Gavon.
Which came out on Blu-ray fairly recently, thanks to Discotech. We have Aikoku Sentai Dai Nippon, directed by Takemiya Kai and Hideaki Anno. Not sure who that second person is.
Yeah, never heard of him. I bet you this guy never did anything in his life after this.
Oh, for real. This was created by Daikon Films, which was Gainax before Gainax came to be. It was a bunch of Japanese film students who came together and just went all out in their passion when it comes to anime and tokusatsu. And I want to highlight Aikoku Sentai Dai Nippon because while not is it a very charming satire of the Russo-Japanese War, you don't really see a lot of indie or I guess Sentai shows that aren't exactly Super Sentai, which is pretty interesting because you do see a lot of parodies of Godzilla, Ultraman, and Kamen Rider, but not too much of Super Sentai. So I just wanted to highlight it because of that. And for being a low budget student film, the cinematography and effects work is actually pretty impressive.
Absolutely. And it's also like very fun. I just wanted to add that it's incredibly ambitious for these people. This, like, I want to say it was like a 6-man team at the time to pull together the budget and resources to make something of this scale. And I'm so glad that a lot of Gainax's early work back during when they were called Daikon Films, I'm so glad a lot of their work has been preserved today on YouTube.
Oh yeah, much like Orochi Strikes Again, which we also want to highlight because director Shinji Higuchi had a good hand of it, as well as directing the special effects. And now what makes this really interesting is because he had just finished working on The Return of Godzilla, which in a way essentially like kickstarted his filmmaking career as a special effects assistant under Teruyuki Nakano, who would mentor him. So it's very just outstanding to see what he learned from such a big project and incorporate it into something him and his fellow filmmakers in school were doing.
Exactly. Now for this next one, I know we have some friends of ours in the audience who are excited to see this.
Oh yes.
freaking love this director, Keita Amamiya. He is someone who got his start working at Toei, working on creature designs for Super Sentai and Kamen Rider. Meanwhile, he would throughout the late 80s, he would transition into directing TV movies. It was a guest director on several Kamen Rider and Super Sentai episodes, and eventually, I feel like this was probably like his big hit, his big breakthrough into feature like theatrical films with Zeram or Zeram. It depends, people have pronounced the name in different ways, but the best way I can describe this, I would say, is Japanese Predator with a protagonist straight out of Metroid. So you have this evil alien called Zeram, sort of like a biological weapon gone awry, who arrives on Earth in pursuit of this bounty hunter named Iria, as she ends up running into a pair of bumbling electricians who have no clue what's going on and are terrified beyond belief as they try to work with Iria in capturing and or putting an end to Zeram for good. It's so much fun, so ingenious, so hilarious. There's like just the right mix of drama, tension, and comedy mixed with a lot of amazing action, special effects. I would even say like this is sort of like the definitive way to really get into Amamiya's work. If you want to have like a fresh, original experience that's not tied to any production prior franchise whatsoever. And yeah, thankfully the 30th anniversary Blu-ray is released, so people can check that out. There is also a sequel that came out, which is, I'd say, just as good, just on a visual standpoint. Overall, it's just a beautiful showcase for the kind of like dark cyberpunk, biopunk aesthetic that Amamiya loves to use in all of his movies.
And stepping away from Amamiya for a moment, we have Hyper Agent Gridman, also from Tsuburaya.
Yes, so this one was a series that I'm sure a lot of people are probably familiar with the name Gridman due to the recent animes SSSS Gridman, SSSS.Dynazenon, and the recent movie Gridman Universe. This is pretty much the show where it all began. Back in the day, Tsuburaya had taken a good long break from Ultraman, and they wanted to dip their toes into making another television series before they decide to bring back their signature franchise. And here we have a very interesting series that is all about kind of teaching people that as we've come to rely more and more on computer technology, that we must always learn not to take it for granted and to use technology responsibly. I feel like it's a message that still resonates with today's audience, and it surprisingly has aged well in terms of its themes of mankind's relationship with technology. As cheesy and outdated as the very experimental digital effects are, it more than makes up with an amazing soundtrack, truly earnest characters and storytelling, and just the most energetic and fun tokusatsu elements on display. Great characters, great production design, wonderful fight sequences. If for anyone who has already seen the anime, please do yourself a favor and check out the original Gridman. I will say that the subtitles on the Blu-ray and Tubi are a bit shaky, but I believe it's also available on Tsuburaya's own YouTube channel. So there's definitely an alternative for that.
Right, and we are back to Amamiya with Mechanical Violator Hokkaido, which is the coolest movie title you will ever hear.
It definitely gets a lot of attention from that alone.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, take it away, Davis.
Okay, so for those unaware, Hokkaido was actually one of the villains in Android Kikaider, which was created by Shochiro Ishinomori, and the Kikaider TV series was kind of in a spot where it wasn't doing so well, and as a way to kind of boost those ratings, they introduced the villain Hokkaido, and Hokkaido was so popular that he became even more popular than Kikaider himself, so much that it was enough to warrant an entire movie. I don't want to say necessarily based on Hokkaido because this story is completely separate from Kikaider, Whereas this one is a lot further into the future, where Hokkaido awakens to an oppressive regime, and he fights alongside this resistance group to help liberate the people of Jesus Town. Yes, it's actually called that. Just roll with it.
Just roll with it. Yes.
And,
when it comes to Amamiya, just roll with it. You won't regret it.
and with this one, you can expect superb acting, phenomenal set pieces, and just some kick-ass action sequences. It's truly superb stuff all around.
Now, I think we definitely need to start wrapping things up, but I just want to say one little bit about the next slide that we have, which is Tekkoki Mikazuki. It is a 6-episode television series, each episode roughly 50 minutes long, an hour long. It's Amamiya again, but doing his take on the giant robo Tetsujin 28 formula about a kid and a giant robot fighting monsters of the week. But it's so much more than that. It will blow your expectations out of the water, and it's surprisingly still available on YouTube, unofficially fully subbed, but still on YouTube. Go check it out.
All right, and again, with Amamiya, we got Garo, and there's actually been a little bit of debate as to what the 5th pillar of Tokusatsu would be. So, some say Gamera, some say Metal Heroes, and a lot of people say Garo, because it's one of the few Tokusatsu franchises that are that's still going to this day, despite taking a few hiatuses here and there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And unlike the Ultraman, Kamen Rider, Super Sentai franchises, Garo is specifically aimed at the primetime audience. Lots of mature themes, violence galore, some nudity here and there. It's definitely the stuff that's not for kids, but it's again so much fun. The drama, storytelling, and characters are all masterfully crafted. The designs are simply to die for. It's easily Amamiya's most popular, greatest creation, and perhaps its popularity might not warrant the title of hidden gem, but in terms of the American Tokusatsu fan base, people really need to check out Garo.
Oh yeah, and as for where you can find Garo, it is available on Internet Archive unofficially, and on Blu-ray. Sort of. The first half of season 1 is out of print at the moment, which really sucks because this is a really good show.
So Kiyotaka Taguchi is a director who currently works on the newest Ultraman television shows and has been a part of Ultraman since 2015. But this is where he got his start with this low-budget film, Daikaiju Eiga G. However, despite its low-budget production, it is shockingly super competent. It's very action driven. It's very bloody. As you can see in the screenshot here, the mix, despite its limited production, the compositing between the tokusatsu elements, green screen, and compositing against live action elements is shockingly handled superbly. And it is sort of like a signature of Kiyotaka Taguchi's style as a special effects director that continues on to this very day with even the most recent Ultraman series. And as we go into the next slide is another of his productions, which is Gehara, the Dark and Long-Haired Monster, which was a 20-minute TV movie that is, in my opinion, the greatest Daikaiju parody I have ever seen. It wonderfully covers all of the classic Showa tropes that come with a lot of the older Toho films that we alluded to at the start of this panel, and it takes things in a way where it's tongue-in-cheek, and you can tell that a lot of love is put into this project, where it's never trying to be mean-spirited, or it's never trying to be poking fun at it. You can tell that they have fun because it comes from a place of love.
All right, up next we have Hell from Beyond the Fog, directed by Daisuke Sato, a very popular indie title that's come out fairly recently. In this one, a blind woman forms a bond with a mysterious sea creature that punishes those who harm her. So it does kind of harken back to not just movies like The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms when it comes to the creature Nebula itself, but also the original King Kong, which kind of brings it full circle. And what really makes this one unique is, instead of having the live action actors with tokusatsu elements, it's all puppetry in a form called Bunraku. It's some really neat stuff. And for this one, we have Taruman, created by NHK. It's all on YouTube, unsubbed. I'll make it quick, but the gimmick of this show is that it's supposed to be the sort of quote unquote lost Tokusatsu series that was quote unquote recently discovered, and they're all playing it up as if it was some great show from the 1970s. They even did an interview with Shinji Higuchi, who claimed to have grown up being a big Taruman fan, and how Taruman was a huge influence on his work, when it's something totally made up, and it's great. And for this last one, we have Everyday Man, directed by indie film director Yoko Higuchi, and in this one, to overcome his anxiety, Everyday Man uses his powers to battle his personal struggles before going on a date. Very simple, very straightforward, just a very fun, short 9-minute watch all around.
I would say, as a last point, that Everyday Man is to Henshin heroes as Gehara is to the kaiju genre. It covers all the tropes in a very loving, charming, passion-filled way, and it's short, brief, straightforward, to the point. It gets the job done, and it's sure to be a blast to watch.
Oh yeah. Okay. We we just ran out of time. But as you can see, there's a whole world out there of this sort of stuff. It's just excellent.
It's pretty much is like the deepest rabbit hole you can ever delve into, because we are talking about 70 years worth of Japanese media. And hopefully if you guys enjoyed it, we'd love to hear your feedback, and if we have enough of a positive response, maybe we'll come back next year for Hidden Gems 2: The Resurrection.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. My name is Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
And I'm Davis Madole, also known as TitanGoji. Thank you all so much for swinging by.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Take it easy. I know it was a little long, but we made it.
Yes.